So my talk title today is Unity, Spiritual Family, a Living Intentional Community. So what is your reality? What reality are you living in? What reality are you in here when we gather? We can come with an intention, we can live with an intention that directs our reality. Oops, leave my pointer. Here we go. So this is a quote from Matt Kahn that says, "You're not here to change the way things are." That might come as a little bit of a surprise. "But to change how you relate to the way things appear." Now think about that for a second. You are not here to change the way things are, the reality that we live in, but to change how you relate to the way things appear. So you're choosing a different reality. And the question is, what is the source of that reality? We're going to delve into that. And I'm going to tell a little story that, is pretty descriptive about how we can have two different realities. And so this little girl was at home with her dad. Her dad wasn't feeling too well. And so he was kind of laid up on the couch watching TV. Her mom was out. And she decided she was going to do something special for her dad. She had her little tea set. And so she would come in and she gave him a cup of tea. Of course, it wasn't tea, it was just water. And he was thrilled, like, oh, how cute, she's looking after me, she's taking care of her dad. And so then she would disappear, and then she'd come back with another cup of tea, and of course we'd go through the whole routine, and this went on and on. And finally the mom came home, and she observed the daughter bring the tea, and she said to him, "Do you realize that she can't reach the faucet?" The only source of water that she could get is at her height in the bathroom and the toilet. So where's your source coming from? That's a great story. I could not tell that one. So the other day I was reading something online from the Independent Unity Ministers group, and it's like a faith statement or a creed, I suppose you could call it. And I thought it was really descriptive and really well done. So I want to share it with us this morning, because this is our annual general meeting Sunday, and I thought it would be really appropriate to give a very focused talk on unity, what we believe. And it says, unity is a way of life that takes us on a spiritual adventure to the very source of our being. It calls us to understand our spiritual nature, our true relationship with God, and to live from that awareness. And that's the opening paragraph. That's pretty powerful. Unity is about connecting to source. And as we walk this sacred path, we hold these principles as truth. The one consistent, dominant presence and power in the universe is God, is the principle of good expressed in all creation as order, harmony, love, and life. And humankind is the highest expression of this divine source, creative energy. Thus, the essence of each person is spiritual. This spirit, individualized in each one of us, expresses according to our conscious awareness and desire to live in alignment with our divine nature. And it says, Jesus is one who brought into full expression his spiritual self, which he called Christ. The spiritual essence that embodies the Spirit of God within each individual. And so as expressions of God, we have the same spiritual capacity and potential for expressing our divine nature as Jesus did. Humankind has been given the power to fulfill its divine destiny through creative thought. According to spiritual law, whatever we hold in consciousness and believe to be true expresses in our lives. Fulfilling our divine potential requires a conscious awareness, willingness, and commitment to follow that Christ within, to put into action the spirit and principles of love as exemplified by Jesus. And it is through the regular practice of prayer and meditation that we receive intuitive guidance and divine revelation from the Christ Spirit within. Our purpose in life is to create heaven on earth. That is, to actualize our own divine potential and live in peace and harmony with all creation. Life is eternal. This physical experience is but one phase of the soul's journey in a never-expanding awareness of its own sacred purpose in the whole expression of God. Pretty powerful statement. So, I'm going to break it down. Unity is a way of life. What does that mean? It means that it's a way of being in the world, a way of seeing, a way of thinking about life, and of responding to our thoughts and feelings about life. It implies that there are guiding principles to help us to do that. So it sounds more like a spiritual path akin to Alcoholics Anonymous, for instance, where people have guidance that is offered to them to apply to their own particular circumstance. And it implies individual responsibility. It's up to you to take those principles and then apply them to your life, how you want to live. It takes us on a spiritual adventure to the source of our being. Are you on a spiritual adventure? I hope so. Because that's what the Unity Path is about. It's meant to be an adventure in spirit to bring us to the source of our being. And so our focus is rather clear then, isn't it? The source of our being. That's what we keep going back to. We want to get to the root of all things, all matters, all identities. You could say that we are spiritual archaeologists who are on a dig to unearth the fundamentals of our history and of our identity. These fundamentals state that we have a spiritual origin and nature. We are dual citizens of this world, this reality, and of another spiritual dimension, another reality, at the same time. We have a foot in each, or we can have a foot in each, it's probably truer to say. And so our purpose and task is to live then in this one reality with a consciousness of this other reality. And this is our sacred task. And so then the principles that guide us are often given in a summary form known as the 5 principles. If you look on the back wall or out in front, we have this little card that says, "In unity we believe." And there's a summary of 5 principles. There is one presence and one power, active as the universe and as my life, God, the good, omnipotent. Our essence is of God, therefore we are inherently good. This God essence was fully expressed in Jesus as the Christ. We are co-creators with God, creating reality through thoughts held in mind. Through prayer and meditation, we align our heart-mind with God. Through thoughts, words, and actions, we live the truth we know. So this is a summary that has been around since the 60s, I believe, from Rosemary Fillmore, who was the granddaughter of Charles and Myrtle Fillmore. They're a sort of a 1-minute elevator speech. You know, that's why we put it out there, because we want you to have those so that if you meet someone who's interested, that you can say, well, these are kind of 5 basic principles. But it's just a summary. You know, there's a whole body of work there in New Thought, and many, many books that have been written by the Fillmores and other people. That's pretty broad and extensive. But this is, as I say, like a summary, just to keep us focused a little bit, to help us. Next Sunday, by the way, is New Thought Sunday. And to honor the occasion, we have a very special interview. Reverend Joe is going to do the interview. And I'm not going to tell you who it is, but it's This is going to be a really powerful experience. So I really encourage you to be here. And so keep it under your hat, Joe, as to who we are interviewing. Yes. And so the first principle reflects the first commandment, if you will, in that it asserts that God is preeminent. All there is, really. There's nothing but God. There is only one presence, which is divine, and it permeates all creation, which implies that it permeates our own being. We are made of God's stuff, God's substance, as Fillmore stated it. Today we might say that we are made of light, spiritual light, with each one of us being a ray of the light that is still connected to and powered by the sun, God. Like every single ray of light at this moment that is around us is still connected. It's being powered from the sun as it goes out through space. There's no separation in that relationship, and we are in fact an extension of the divine energy of light and love in time and space. There is a power within natural light. We know that. It makes things grow, gives you tans. And it enables and causes the light to travel through space and time and to penetrate the darkness. And it actually transforms the darkness, giving it its energy. So we can think of ourselves similarly. Whether we know it or not, our very existence is powered by God, since there is no other life than the life of God. We know we give it lots of names. We have spiritual names, religious names, scientific names, but it's the same reality. And in its nature, it's good and only good. A principle for good which expresses as harmony, as wholeness, as light, wisdom, beauty, love, and life itself. And humans are said to be unique expressions of this God life, this divine consciousness, being made in the image and likeness of it. Or at least we have the capacity and the potential to reflect that consciousness when we are self-aware, self-realized, which means when we know who we really are. And this isn't just an intellectual knowing, but rather an embodying mentally, an embodying emotionally, an embodying physically and spiritually. And we often call this essence spirit. All the native traditions talk about the Great Spirit. Christianity talks about the Spirit. Others talk about Shakti. It's the same thing. It's this life-giving force and power. And it's uniquely individualized in every particle of the universe and in every human being. This essence, then, is eternal and infinite, and that is our destiny, to be eternal, to be infinite, beyond our comprehension right now, yet nevertheless, it's the goal to which we're all aspiring. And that essence expresses according to our conscious awareness and our desire to live in alignment with that divine nature. We call this free will. And this is our biggest challenge because it requires our realizing that we have two competing identities going on, don't we? Two realities, if you will. What we call our ego mind and our divine essence. The former, ego, has to submit and be willing to allow the latter, the divine essence, to take over the planning and the control of our lives. That submission is what the word Islam is referring to. The word Islam means submission. And that's really what the spiritual journey is. It's a submitting of that independent, separate ego mind to this one mind. And the concept of the holy war is exactly this battle that we all experience every moment of making the choice between my thinking, my wanting to be in control, or opening up and allowing the divine thought and to give the divine the control. So we have to come to the realization that there is actually no loss in giving up our strong ego control and allowing this bigger self to take the steering wheel of our lives. But it's a real challenge, isn't it? We all know that, because we're all so attached to our opinions, our likes, our dislikes, our preferences, and feelings that our ego either prefers or rejects. All of those together form a scaffolding that our ego constructs that it identifies with. So think about it. It's like a building, and there's a scaffolding. The ego is the scaffolding around the building. But if we are able to come to trust our essential nature, the building, then we can deconstruct the ego scaffold, and we can uncover the edifice that is lying beneath it. In other words, who we really are. It says, if you can win over your mind, you can win over the whole world. Now you can think of that another way. If you win your mind, then you've won the world. And so unity comes from the lineage of Jesus the Christ, and we say without any detriment to any other spiritual leader or tradition that he was one such human who uncovered the edifice, which we call the Christ, and he won over his mind. The Christ then is the indwelling spiritual essence. Oops, that's not supposed to be up there. The Christ then is the indwelling spiritual essence given full expression in a human being. So Jesus gave full expression to it as a male itinerant Jewish rabbi over 2,000 years ago in the Middle East. And that took the form of a very loving, kind human being, presence, clearly expressing the unbreakable bond, as he saw it, between creator and creation, between parent and child. And as expressions of God, we have the same spiritual capacity and potential to express our divine nature in these modern times, in these bodies and in these personalities. And we achieve it through allowing the power of God to flow through us as inspired creative thought. We have authorship, but it comes from a place of intuition or inspiration. And coming from this place, it's loving, it's creative, and it creates a world that works for all, not just for me, not just for my group. It doesn't come from a place of fear or of lack, but rather from the source of all good, which is abundant and prosperous. It knows that there is no lack, and therefore in oneself there is no lack, because it knows the same source is within, seeking to manifest all good without. So that's the alternative reality that is being offered to us. And spiritual law or principle will always back this up in our experience if we submit to that inner prompting and inner knowing of the truth about how this world works and who we are. There is no difference then between Jesus and us in our essence, which is why he calls us brothers and sisters. I do not call you slaves, because we are equals, he says, because we share the same spirit. The only difference between Jesus and us is a difference of degree. He expressed fully the divine essence and potential that was within him, called the Christ. We have done so perhaps to a lesser degree. But we have the opportunity to fulfill that potential just as he did. To become another Christ, which is our purpose here on earth, does require a conscious awareness, a willingness, a commitment to allow that indwelling Christ presence that is our very self to have its way with us, to be the governing voice of our thoughts and our actions. It requires a dedication of our lives to the Spirit and to the principles of love exemplified in the kind, loving, and healing presence that Jesus was. Many times, too, we will be asked to say and to pray, Father, Mother God, forgive them, for they know not what they do. So how do we get to this position of submitting and partnering with the creative energy of love that is within us? Well, like many spiritual paths, we say that prayer and meditation are required. Now, these are not magic bullets that work in some rote way. They can be used by the ego just as easily, become tools that it manipulates to develop spiritual egos, which is just another shell game. Whatever spiritual practice we engage in must bring us into some contact with the living God. Are you aware that you are the living God right now? Is that where you're living your life from? This presence that is a vital, living force and power. We must encounter the living God within us as source and as a stream of energy. Where are you getting your energy today? Where did you get it yesterday, this morning? Is it an energy of love, of care? Is it healing? Is it an energy of guidance? And it must be a timely practice done in every moment if we are going to successfully express this divine nature. You can't rely on yesterday's inspiration and contact for today. That's the story of the manna in the desert. Each day you had to find new bread, new manna for the day. How do we make decisions about our lives? Do we stop? Do we go within? Do we ask for guidance? It's as simple as that. Do we quiet our ego mind enough for some information, a new idea, for some direction to come through? Are we open-minded enough to listen and to then follow the guidance that's given, trusting the indwelling essence and presence of God that we are? I turn within, take a breath and ask, what is mine to do in love? When I hear the answer, I take action. It matters not if others argue that this is not the right action to take. It only matters that I listen to the divine wisdom in the depths of my being and act. This is the daily practice. So what we're really talking about here is a practice of presence, which in turns becomes a ministry of presence. I practice being present to my real self, to my true self, to divine self, to source, to love. And that practice brings me guidance and peace, and I then extend that presence in ways that are loving and kind towards myself and others. And this is how we build heaven on earth, and how we really become a blessing to the world, as we sang. So it showcases the relationship between receiving and giving. God gives us its very life, and we treasure it as our own essence, and then we return it by living, loving, and caring, thus completing the circle by which God expresses love and receives it back as in and through us. And thus our lives become the fulfillment of the intention to overcome any and all thoughts of limitation or limitation of action or expression. You are not here to change the way things are, but to change how you relate to the way things appear. Does that make more sense to us now? we are seeing with one eye, with the spiritual eye, not with the dualistic human eyes. So our practice then is to learn how to hold that high vision, that high vibration steady as often as we can until we master the practice. And we know, don't we, that it takes a village for all of us to do this. We need others to help us and prompt us and guide us and be teachers. We need one another to create a community of like-minded people who will support us in our vision, as well as in our implementation of that vision for our own lives, for their lives, and for the world by extension. And so that's what our spiritual community here at Unity is all about. And on a day like today, when we have our annual general meeting, it's really a time to celebrate who we are. We need each other to fulfill our purpose and to make heaven on earth, because we need to be in relationship with all forms that the divine takes, to come to know its diversity, creativity, but above all to know our capacity to love. And we can only do that through relationship. And so being a spiritual community is all about a call to love. Are you open to loving the people that are around you and letting others see that love? Because to know our self-worth as lovable human divine beings and to love in return is the ultimate fulfillment of our purpose of coming into form and of our soul's journey. And so that brings us back to who's making this journey. It's our soul. That's the essence. So this morning, let's appreciate our soul family, our soul group, our common journey, and for the presence of each other here. And our mission statement at Unity in the Gold Country is to awaken in love, in unity with all. May it be so.